I'm divorcing you because I'm gonna remarry the director's daughter. Up until that moment, Henry was grinning like an idiot. But a week later, the situation took a drastic turn. That was just a few hours ago. Henry was approached by the chairman, who was visiting the office. "How's my granddaughter, Kinsley, doing?" "Huh?" "I'm talking about my granddaughter, Kinsley. She became your wife, right?" It was then that Henry finally grasped the situation. And he turned pale. How panicked was he? It's not hard to imagine. But so what? I was 100 times more shocked. You can't understand what it's like to be betrayed by someone you trusted right in front of you. So, I'm gonna teach Henry a lesson. I'll show him the despair of being betrayed right in front of you. He can't escape now. Just now, he's brought himself to the brink of despair. I smiled. My name is Kinsley. At 38, I'm currently working as a contract employee. When I got married 13 years ago, I quit my job once. But we couldn't save enough money to buy a house. So, after discussing it with my husband Henry, who works at the same place, I returned to my old job as a contract employee. In fact, that decision wasn't wrong. After returning to work, we've been able to save smoothly. However, not everything has been going perfectly. There's actually a troublemaker named Ellie at work. Ellie not only comes in late but also hardly does any work. When someone reprimands her, she always says the same thing. "I'll tell my dad." Ellie's father is the head of sales, and he's both my boss and Henry's. So, both Henry and I find it hard to scold Ellie. What should I do about Ellie? Recently, that's all I can think about. Anyway, guiding Ellie is my responsibility. I just have to make sure to reprimand her properly. I sighed as I looked up at the clock. It was just past 9:30. Ellie hasn't shown up yet. I was just thinking, late again, when I heard a drawn-out greeting from the entrance. "Good morning." I turned around and saw Ellie looking sleepy. "Ellie, do you have any idea what time it is? Why don't you check the clock yourself instead of asking?" Ellie snorted. I held back the anger welling up inside me. "That's not the point. I'm saying you're late." "Huh? Late? So what?" Ellie didn't seem the least bit remorseful. In fact, she seemed defiant. "Listen, you're an adult." I was just about to give her a proper talking to today, when she interrupted. "You're so annoying. If you keep complaining, I'll tell my dad." "What? Your dad?" "That's right, I'll tell him there's an old lady here at work who's picking on me." Ellie sneered. All I could do was sigh. Here we go again. But giving up at this point is why nothing changes. I made up my mind. I continued to stare directly at Ellie. "If you want to tattle, go ahead. As long as you do your job properly, say whatever you want. Who does this old lady think she is?" Ellie slammed her bag on the desk with a bang. The nearby employees flinched. Of course, I was startled too. But I couldn't show it on my face. "Why were you late?" "None of your business." "Something you can't even explain? Don't you have any sense of responsibility as an adult?" When I asked, Ellie pouted. "You're so annoying." "Who cares?" "I do. This isn't a game." Just as I was about to scold Ellie further, there was a loud clap of hands. I turned towards the sound and saw the director standing there. The director spoke to me. "That's enough lecturing. Get back to work." "But sir, you can't just..." I tried to protest immediately. However, Ellie interrupted first. "Dad. So, this person." Ellie sidled up to her father and whispered something in his ear. The director listened to Ellie's words, nodding. After a while, the director smirked. Then, he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Can't you let this slide? I'll talk to my daughter too." "But..." "Or, is it that you want to quit?" It was a veiled threat. Obviously, they couldn't just fire me without cause. But they could choose not to renew my contract. That would be as good as being fired. I had no choice but to remain silent. I averted my gaze and looked down slightly. That's better. Now, take care of my daughter. Yes. I reluctantly responded. However, I wasn't just sitting idly by. Henry and I had discussed how to deal with this. Henry, you should also talk to her. Yeah, sure. Henry gave a vague reply. I could understand his hesitation. Although Henry was Ellie's supervisor, the director, Ellie's father, was Henry's boss. I get your position, but you're still her supervisor. Ellie joined the company about 6 months ago. Before that, she had never worked at all. But at 27, with people around her getting married, Ellie apparently started thinking she should get married too. Also, she figured it would be better to have a job if she wanted to get married. So, she asked her father to get her a position at this company. Given those circumstances, no one really wanted to deal with Ellie. Most employees declined the role of her mentor, and it eventually fell to me, a contract employee. In other words, I was stuck with being her mentor without any real authority. I thought Henry, as her supervisor and a section chief, would be better suited to talk to her. But, the director doesn't think well of us. Really? Yes, that's right. Don't you remember what happened when we got married, Kinsley? When Henry said that, it reminded me of something. It was right after we decided to get married. We went straight to the manager, who was our boss. He was still a section chief back then, but he was our boss all the same. When we told the director about our engagement, he had a sour look on his face for some reason. Later, we found out that he wasn't happy about our marriage. What particularly annoyed him was the fact that it was an office romance. He thought we weren't taking our jobs seriously. Like we were just coming to the company to date. But I couldn't help that I felt attracted to Henry and found him reliable through working together. The most memorable event was when Henry covered for my big mistake. That day, I got a call from a client saying the ordered goods hadn't arrived. Panicked, I looked into it and found out there was a data entry error in the order management sheet. And it turned out I was the one who had made the error. Faced with such a huge mistake, I was in complete shock. At that moment, Henry was the first to take action. He immediately checked the inventory and delivered the missing items. Thanks to him, the situation was resolved without further issues. I was in tears as I thanked Henry. Thank you so much. You saved me. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you fix them. Henry was my senior, so maybe handling it was natural for him. But to me, Henry seemed incredibly dependable. So, I confessed my feelings and we started dating. Marrying Henry, whom I met at work, felt inevitable to me. No matter what the director thought. But even now, the director still holds a grudge. It's been 13 years since we got married. That was so long ago. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. The director still doesn't like us. But anyway, that's why I don't want to provoke the director. Henry was indirectly telling me to overlook Ellie's behavior. Reluctantly, I decided to tolerate it. I had a lot to say. But if I drew the director's ire, it would be over for us. Especially if Henry had a hard time at work, it would be a disaster. Just bear with it, just a little longer. Why just a little longer? Well, we've saved up enough for the house, and it looks like I might get a promotion soon. A promotion. When I repeated it back, Henry began talking excitedly. A while ago, Henry secured a big contract. The CEO apparently praised him for it. Other executives were also full of praise for him. So, he might be promoted soon. Henry told me about it. Is that true? Yeah, the executive VP mentioned it, so it's pretty solid. But if the director doesn't oppose it. So, that's why he doesn't want to upset the director. Now I understood why he told me to overlook Ellie. If I get promoted, my salary will go up. Then you can quit your job, Kinsley. Well, yeah. We had been saving up for our house steadily. Even if I quit my job now, we could probably manage. And if Henry gets promoted, our income would be even more secure. Originally, I planned to quit my job once we saved enough for the house. Maybe it's time. I slowly nodded. All right. If you get promoted, I'll quit my job. Are you sure? We've nearly saved enough for the house, so it's a good opportunity. I decided to endure just a little longer, as Henry suggested. And once Henry's promotion was confirmed, I would quit my job. I finally made up my mind. After that, I felt much more at ease. It didn't bother me much when Ellie was late, and I didn't care if she slacked off. Still, I was technically her mentor. I kept giving her superficial warnings. I told you not to be late, remember? Huh? More nagging? You're so persistent, lady. Ellie's words annoyed me. But I replied with a forced smile. It's not nagging, it's a warning. You're an adult, act like one. Yeah. Ellie responded dismissively. In the past, I would have raised my voice at this point. But now that I decided to quit, it didn't bother me anymore. Besides, I heard rumors that Ellie might be leaving soon to get married. In short, I would disappear from Ellie's life, and Ellie would disappear from Henry's. If you could call it a win-win, then it was a result that made everyone happy. So, I didn't care how Ellie reacted. A few weeks later, Henry's promotion to deputy director was confirmed. I didn't know much about what a deputy director does in general. But at our company, it's the second highest position, right under the director. So, Henry got promoted from section chief to deputy director. Just as he said, and I was thrilled. Congratulations, Henry. Thanks, Kinsley. I couldn't have done it without your support over the past 13 years. No, it's because of your hard work, Henry. We had that conversation last night, toasting with some fancy wine. Riding that wave of joy, I decided to submit my resignation letter to the company. I had already discussed it with Henry. So, I went to the director's office first thing in the morning. Once I submitted my resignation, I'd be free from Ellie. I could finally indulge in planning for our new home. Thinking about that, I knocked on the director's office door. The director responded from inside. Excuse me. Do you have a moment? I said as I entered the office. The director was checking his emails. He briefly glanced up at my voice, but quickly looked back down. What is it? What do you need this early? I'm sorry. I have something to discuss. Discuss? I'm busy. The director stopped what he was doing and stared at me. Nervously, I pulled out my resignation letter. Please accept this. A resignation letter? Are you quitting? The manager looked puzzled. I smiled back. Yes. Thank you for everything. I see. Finally leaving, huh? The director nodded several times, looking satisfied. It annoyed me, but I pretended not to care. Yes. Since my husband got promoted to deputy director, I thought it was a good opportunity. Oh, right. So, are you quitting to move back to the countryside? I had no idea what the director meant by that. As I stood there bewildered, I suddenly heard a knock. Excuse me, sir. Without waiting for a response, Henry walked in. I looked at Henry suspiciously. When he saw me, Henry quickly averted his gaze, looking uncomfortable. Without meeting my eyes, Henry walked up to the director. Sir, I brought the documents for the contract we discussed. Good work. It seems everything's settled now. The director glanced back and forth between Henry and me as he spoke. As I tilted my head in confusion, Henry nodded. The work part is done. Now about the divorce. Henry's words shocked me. Then, without missing a beat, Henry turned to me. Actually, there's something I need to tell you. Something you need to tell me? Yes. I want a divorce. I'm going to remarry Ellie, the manager's daughter. Henry grinned. I was speechless. Divorce? Divorce, what does that even mean? And he's remarrying Ellie. My mind raced with all sorts of thoughts. I was so overwhelmed I felt like I was about to collapse. Seeing me in such a state, Henry said calmly, "You've gotten quite old, and I'd prefer a younger woman." What? Wait a minute. I'm not waiting. We're getting divorced. Here, I've even got the divorce papers ready. Henry pulled a paper from his pocket. It was a divorce form with Henry's name on it. He thrust the form into my hands. Then, he said to me, as I stood there in a daze, "You've already submitted your resignation, right? So, take it and leave." What? Why? What's going on? Being in the same office after divorce would be awkward. Now get out. Henry pushed me out of the director's office. I was quickly kicked out. Later, I confronted Henry when he came out of the director's office. But his answer didn't change. He wanted a divorce to marry Ellie. He'd pay alimony, so I should sign the divorce papers immediately. He kept repeating those words. Still not understanding, I signed the divorce papers. By the time I realized it, I was at my parents' house, and movers were working in front of me. I found out later that I had called the moving company myself. In the end, I had unknowingly ended my 13-year marriage with Henry. After that, I spent my days at my parents' house in a daze. I couldn't withdraw my resignation since I had submitted it myself. The signed divorce papers were already in Henry's hands. Basically, I had lost everything. How did it come to this? That thought kept crossing my mind. But after a few days, my head started to clear up. That man, I'll never forgive him. I felt a surge of anger towards Henry. I clenched my phone tightly. I'll show them all what hell looks like. Determined to get revenge, I sent an email to a certain someone. A week later, Henry suddenly called me. We hadn't even discussed alimony yet, and I had plenty to say to him. So, without hesitation, I answered the phone. I took a deep breath before speaking. "Hello, Henry? Aren't you at work?" I glanced at the clock. It was just after 1 p.m. I felt something was off. Henry, sounding panicked, asked me, "Why didn't you say anything?" Huh? What are you talking about? You're the granddaughter of the company chairman. Why didn't you tell me before the divorce? I thought he might be calling to apologize, but that's what he said. I was exasperated by his words. Suddenly feeling weary, I fell silent. Then Henry started talking non-stop. Here's what Henry said. When he announced he wanted a divorce, he said to me, "I'm divorcing you to remarry the director's daughter." Until then, Henry had been all smug. But a week later, everything changed. And that happened just a few hours ago. Henry was approached by the chairman, who was visiting the company. "How's my granddaughter, Kinsley, doing?" "What?" "Kinsley, my granddaughter. She became your wife, didn't she?" It was at that moment Henry finally understood the situation. And he turned pale. Just how panicked was Henry? It's not hard to imagine. But what does that matter? I was far more shocked. He couldn't possibly understand the feeling of being betrayed by someone you trusted so deeply. That's why I intend to teach Henry a lesson. The despair of being betrayed right in front of your eyes. There's no escaping it now. You've placed yourself on the brink of despair. I smiled. As I asked Henry on the phone, "So what?" "What do you mean, so what? If I'd known, I wouldn't have divorced you." His words hit me like a slap in the face. He wouldn't have divorced me if I was the chairman's granddaughter? That's basically saying he didn't care about me for who I am. Does he even realize that? No, he probably doesn't, which is why he's saying it. We lived together for 13 years, and Henry thought I didn't matter at all. It's a bit of a shock. But at the same time, it cleared my conscience. I didn't need to hold back in my revenge against Henry. Thinking that, I decided to give him one last chance. Then why did you marry me? Depending on his answer, I might let him off the hook. But Henry's answer was beyond anything I imagined. Your dad's company, right? They were one of our major clients. So, basically, he wanted to marry me to connect with my father. And apparently, he even fabricated my mistake to make it happen. Then, he swooped in to save me and managed to marry me. Henry actually admitted this. I was left speechless. Never mind that. You need to come back right away. I'm in trouble without you. Huh? You didn't need me, so we got divorced. No, that's not it. Things have changed since then. Henry, his voice breaking, started to explain. When the chairman asked Henry about me, he was at a loss for words. He couldn't exactly say we had just divorced. So, Henry ended up telling the chairman. Actually, Kinsley is at home. At home? Isn't she working here? Oh, yes. I had her quit her job. We're planning to buy a new house. He said the house was going to be designed the way I wanted. That I was gathering information for it. And recently, his work had been recognized, leading to a promotion. So, he wanted me to become a full-time homemaker from now on. Henry apparently lied to the chairman. And the chairman believed him. Then, the chairman gave Henry this message. Well then, tell her to come to the party to give an update on the new house. A party? There's a business networking event tomorrow night at the hotel. I'll be there too, so Kinsley should show her face. In other words, if I didn't go to this party, Henry would be suspected of lying. That's why he called me in a panic. Henry pleaded with me through his tears. Please, come to the party with me tomorrow for the chairman. No way. Why not? If you don't come, the chairman will think I lied. Will think you lied. No, you actually did lie. I thought that but was too exasperated to say it. As Henry's voice grew louder, he begged. Please! Just think of it as helping me out. Why should I help you? Take Ellie and introduce her as your new wife. I can't do that. Are you mocking me? Henry's voice rose. You're the one who's mocking me. I wanted to say. In any case, I took a deep breath. Then, I answered him clearly. Look, we're divorced. Just report the truth to the chairman. I can't do that, that's why I'm asking you. I'm not leaving until you agree. What, here? I asked, confused. But Henry responded quite seriously. Yeah. I'm outside your parents' house right now. You must be inside. I rushed to the window. Peeking out, I saw Henry standing at the front door. Sure, my parents' house was the only place I could turn to after the divorce. But that doesn't mean it's normal for Henry to just show up here. Go away. You're causing a disturbance standing there. No way. I'm not leaving until you agree. Henry's voice got louder. It was so loud that I could hear him directly through the door. This could turn into a problem for the neighbors. I had to avoid that. Just leave. Otherwise, I'm calling the police. The police? Go ahead, call them if you want. Henry said defiantly. Fed up, I immediately hung up. You think your ex-wife will just do what you say forever? I promptly called the police. In less than a few minutes, I heard the siren of a patrol car. Looking outside, I saw Henry fleeing at the sound of the siren. Even after Henry ran off, my phone kept ringing constantly. It was all from Henry. Of course, I had nothing more to say to him. So, I didn't answer any of his calls. But what about the party? I couldn't help but wonder. Given Henry's position, he couldn't just skip it. But what if he went alone? The outcome was obvious. Well, I guess I'll go watch him make a fool of himself. I laughed and asked my father for a favor. Here's what it was about. After hearing about the party from Henry, I contacted my father immediately. I told him to pretend I had asked for this favor. When the divorce was decided, I had sent an email to my grandfather, the chairman, intending to tell him about it. However, I didn't mention the divorce in the email. I only wrote that I had something important to discuss. Probably, seeing that email, the chairman came to visit under the guise of an inspection to meet me. But he couldn't find me. So, he designated the party for us to talk. Realizing this, I arranged for a meeting with my father and grandfather. If my father suggested this, the chairman wouldn't refuse. This provided a reason for my father to attend the party. Conveniently, my father runs a different company from the chairman. In short, my father is also a company executive. So, it wouldn't be odd for him to be at a business networking event. All I had to do was pretend to be his secretary and attend the party. That way, I could legally watch Henry squirm. Smiling to myself, I prepared for the next day. As the evening approached, it was time for the party. I went to the banquet hall at the local hotel with my father. While watching from the corner of the room, the chairman soon appeared. He usually doesn't even come to the office, but he seemed well respected by the other executives. Before long, a nervous Henry showed up. Seeing him, the chairman immediately approached him.
Good to see you. So, where's Kinsley? Kinsley didn't come?
The chairman looked puzzled. Naturally, he expected me to be there. I was curious about how Henry would explain this. I quietly watched the scene unfold.
What happened to Kinsley?
The chairman asked again. Finally, Henry answered. Well, Kinsley is not feeling well. She's resting at home. Henry started making excuses. The chairman looked disappointed as he listened. It would be troublesome if he believed Henry's excuses. Thinking that, I quietly moved to the corner of the room. Then, I called the chairman from behind a pillar. Huh? Oh, hold on. It's a call from Kinsley.
A call from Kinsley?
Seeing Henry's shocked expression, I spoke to the chairman, who had answered the phone.
Hi, Grandpa, long time no see.
Oh, Kinsley. How are you feeling? What? I feel great. I answered cheerfully. The chairman's brow furrowed.
Kinsley, aren't you supposed to be sick today?
Nope. I'm feeling fine. Who told you that? When I asked, the chairman slowly turned his gaze towards Henry. Staring intently at Henry, the chairman asked me in a slightly lower voice. I heard it from your husband. Do you mean Henry? Well, he's not my husband anymore, he's my ex-husband, Grandpa. The chairman's eyes widened as I spoke. Meanwhile, Henry's eyes were darting nervously. Watching the two of them, I continued, trying to suppress my laughter. Actually, I divorced Henry. He said he preferred someone younger.
Oh. I see.
Despite his calm words, the chairman's face was gradually turning red. To further fuel the fire, I told the chairman more about what Henry had said. Henry is going to remarry the director's daughter. He didn't tell me, but I guess he's aiming for a promotion.
What's that supposed to mean?
He said if he'd known I was your granddaughter, he wouldn't have divorced me. As soon as I said that, the call abruptly ended. Apparently, the chairman had hung up out of sheer rage. Still holding his phone tightly, the chairman turned to Henry and shouted.
What do you mean by that? You ditched my granddaughter.
No, it's not like that.
Then why did you divorce her?
Eek! I couldn't help but laugh at the sight. The chairman began scolding Henry loudly. It was all one-sided, the chairman was shouting, while Henry was unable to say a word. He didn't even flinch. Amused, I watched the scene with a smirk. After a while, I had an idea and took a photo of Henry apologized deeply from a distance.
This should teach you a lesson. But I'm not done yet.
I muttered as I checked the time on my phone. It was just past 7 p.m. She should be here by now. I looked towards the entrance.
Ellie's late even at a time like this.
I sighed. Actually, I had contacted Ellie earlier. Or rather, saying I called her might be a bit misleading. Instead of calling, I told Ellie over the phone. There's a party tonight at the hotel. A party? So what? It's a networking event for local business owners. A lot of wealthy people will be there.
Really? For real?
I noticed the change in her voice. Gotcha, I thought with a smirk. Henry's gonna be there, so why don't you go with him? To be honest, I had baited Ellie. She definitely took the bait. So, she was sure to show up. If Ellie came, it would stir up even more drama.
Though why she's late even now is beyond me.
I muttered, stomping my foot. Just then, Ellie strolled into the venue. She wore a flashy dress and gaudy makeup. She stood out, but not in a good way. As soon as Ellie entered, she headed straight for the chairman. She must have known what he looked like. Ignoring Henry, who was still apologizing, she approached the chairman.
Thank you so much for yesterday.
Huh? Who are you?
Oh, come on. I'm Ellie, the daughter of the director. We met yesterday during your visit, remember?
Ellie laughed crudely. The chairman's expression suddenly clicked.
Oh, right. You're the daughter. By the way, are you married?
Yes. My husband is Henry, the deputy director of sales.
But he already had a wife, didn't he?
When the chairman asked, Ellie laughed loudly. You mean that old lady? We've already got rid of her.
Got rid of her? Why?
Because she was a nuisance. And isn't it better to have a younger wife? Ellie continued in this vein. She had been dating Henry for a long time. Henry said he preferred a younger woman over the old lady. And his ex-wife was annoying at work. Always nagging and complaining. So, they kicked her out of the company.
By now, she's probably jobless and crying alone.
Ellie laughed crudely again. I had indeed called Ellie to stir things up. I wanted her reputation to take a hit and for her to get a bit of payback. But I hadn't expected her to go this far. This is bad, I thought, hurrying over to Ellie. Just as the chairman, shaking with rage, was about to yell, I stepped in between them.
Watch your mouth!
The chairman was startled by my appearance. Equally surprised, Ellie immediately frowned.
Huh? What are you doing here? That doesn't matter. Don't you know the meaning of the word limit?
Ellie pouted at my words.
Huh? You're a nobody now. Don't act all high and mighty like you're still my coworker. I'm not acting high and mighty. I'm just telling you not to insult me so brazenly.
If you say too much, there's no going back. I was about to continue when Ellie laughed it off.
What? Are you saying you're hurt at your age?
Oh no, this is beyond repair. Realizing that, I pointed at Ellie's feet. By the way, do you know what that is?
That?
Ellie looked down where I was pointing. There, she saw Henry still being apologizing. What? Henry? What are you doing?
Henry is apologizing to the chairman. To the chairman? For what?
For the same reason as you. Insulting me. When I said that, Ellie tilted her head. Then sneered.
Huh? Why would he apologize to the chairman for insulting you? Because I'm the chairman's granddaughter. Huh? What? You!
Ellie blinked rapidly, looking back and forth between me and the chairman. The chairman nodded quietly in response to Ellie's gaze. That's when Ellie finally realized how deep in trouble she was.
What? But you never mentioned, not a single word.
Of course, I hadn't openly said anything. I didn't want to be treated differently because of it. But Ellie, who always used her father's authority to her advantage, probably never considered such a thing. Sighing, I calmly advised Ellie.
So, if you're going to apologize, now's your chance. What? Are you using the chairman's power to threaten me? Don't be ridiculous.
Ellie pushed over a nearby table. There was a crash as expensive plates and other items shattered. Oh no. She's done it now. Ellie was too agitated to realize what her tantrum would cause. Soon, she started shouting loudly.
It's all your fault. You should have left Henry sooner.
Ellie shoved me. Security guards quickly arrived on the scene and restrained her, then asked the chairman what to do.
Call the police. She won't learn her lesson any other way. What? The police. Why?
Ellie then started yelling at the chairman. I stepped in to calm her down.
You're an adult. You should know how to take responsibility. What does that even mean?
Ellie gritted her teeth in frustration. In the end, she was taken away by the police without apologizing. Ellie was later arrested on charges of assault and vandalism. That's when she finally came to her senses. She suddenly became quiet and tearfully apologized to the police. But an apology didn't mean she would be let off the hook. Ellie was put on trial and eventually fined. Even then, she probably thought she was lucky. She might lose her job, but she likely assumed her father would cover the fines and compensation. But by then, both Henry and the director were penniless. The director was forced to resign after the chairman held him accountable for Ellie's actions. He looked for another job, but no company would hire him. It was probably because Ellie's incident had spread through the party attendees. Unable to find work, the director now works as a low-paid security guard. As for Henry, though he was reprimanded by the chairman, he wasn't punished beyond that. Cheating wasn't enough grounds for dismissal according to the law. However, not getting fired didn't mean everything was fine. After clashing with the chairman and me, Henry quickly became isolated at work. Eventually, unable to stand the loneliness, Henry quit the company. He, like the director, couldn't find another job and ended up working part-time at a grocery store. With both of them in such dire straits, they couldn't afford to help Ellie. Naturally, Ellie had to pay the fines in compensation herself by working at a well-paying nightclub. As for me, my grandfather, the chairman, asked me to return to work. But I declined. I had already started working for my father's company. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I asked Dad for help when I left the company.
That's fine. As long as you're happy, I don't mind at all.
The chairman's smile reminded me of the familiar face I'd seen many times in my childhood. When I bought a new house, out of the blue, a truckload of stuff arrived. Bob said loudly,
From today, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with it, we're gonna divorce.
And he snorted proudly. Finally, I can really divorce him. I won't have to suffer anymore. Thinking that, tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. Seeing me cry, Bob looked puzzled and leaned in, examining my face. It was always Bob who acted without considering others. So, I should be allowed to speak my mind. All right then, I'll proceed with the divorce paperwork.
You're lying.
I placed the business card of the divorce attorney I had on hand on the table. Bob looked shocked, his eyes darting around as if he didn't know what to say. I can't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never listens and never reflects on his actions. I don't want to be with someone like that. Seeing that Bob wasn't accepting the idea of divorce, I decided to tell him something. Hearing that name, Bob looked terrified. When I spoke to that person and explained the situation, Bob just kept making excuses. My name is Katherine Johnson, a 32-year-old woman. I work as an office employee. On the other hand, my husband, Bob Johnson, works in elderly care on a shift basis. I work regular hours, but Bob switches between day and night shifts. We met back in high school when Bob transferred to my school. He was a hard worker in middle school, participating in extracurricular activities and was part of the main team since freshman year. The high school I attended was known for its strong focus on clubs and teams. They always secured the top 3 positions in any competition. Not only in clubs, but the school also had students who excelled academically. I wasn't sure if it was the natural environment or if the teachers made it that way, but it was a great setup for someone like me who wanted to go to college. Then, one day, a transfer student came to our classroom. The room was buzzing with excitement about whether the transfer student was a boy or girl, and during the morning assembly, the student was introduced. Following the teacher's instruction, the transfer student introduced himself. "I'm Bob Johnson. Nice to meet you all."
All right, everyone, be nice to him. Bob, take that empty seat at the back.
"Yes, got it." Bob walked over and took the seat next to mine. Later, the teacher assigned me to show Bob around the school. From that day, Bob and I started talking a lot. He was quiet, and I, hating silence, would always start conversations. Seeing this, our classmates would sometimes ask if we were dating. One day, out of the blue, Bob casually said, "Yeah, we're dating. Didn't you know?" Which caught me by surprise. From there, we naturally started our relationship. We went out for dinners, movies, and had a lot of fun together. I was happy. After high school, I chose to work instead of going to college. Bob was insistent that we live together. Given our long relationship since high school, moving in together and eventually getting married was smooth. Then one day, Bob started working in elderly care. He said it was because his mother had worked in the same field. Although he avoided working in the same facility as his mom, they seemed to have a close relationship where he'd often seek advice about his job. Lately, he's been saying that he's having issues with his father. I asked him to tell me more, but Bob never really shared the details. I confided in my childhood friend, Mike, about all these issues. Of course, I didn't meet him personally, but decided to visit the mental clinic where he works as a counselor. Mike still had that same smile he had back in high school. He gives off that classic good guy vibe. Now, he's a certified psychologist and works as a counselor. From my perspective, Mike is truly remarkable.
Mike, you're amazing. So, you're a counselor, right? You listen to people's problems because you have it all figured out?
No, I just want to help people. Catherine, are things not going well with Bob?
Yeah, there seems to be something going on with Bob's parents. He keeps things from me and won't tell me anything.
Hearing this, Mike hummed thoughtfully. Seeing him concerned, I continued talking about Bob. Back in our 20s, right after we got married, our house felt so cold, unlike a newlywed's home. When I returned home, Bob never greeted me with a welcome back. We ate meals separately and just adjusted our sleep schedules for work. I never thought our marriage would become so cold. So, I prioritized my happiness over enduring this life. But Bob refused. He raised his voice and looked down on me, saying, "You won't leave me."
You loved me when we started dating, didn't you?
Yeah, but isn't it strange for a couple to not talk? I think other couples communicate more.
Oh really? So, you're comparing me to other guys? Should I take that as you cheating?
Wait, what? What are you talking about? His confusing words truly baffled me. We were just discussing our relationship. Why is he bringing up cheating just because I mentioned how other couples behave? It's a big misunderstanding. This isn't about cheating. The real issue is I don't understand what Bob is thinking. Wouldn't it be easier for both of us if we just divorced? I explained all this to Mike. Isn't it pretty serious if you want to divorce but can't? But Mike just nodded, listening without judging, and started typing on his computer. Everything you've told me is securely stored, Catherine. I'll contact you once I figure out a solution. Honestly, after hearing all this, I think divorce might be the best option. Mike said as he gently closed his laptop and put it into his briefcase. He inputs the data on the computer to ensure maximum privacy. Mike agreed to help me find a solution. I felt deeply grateful. Having someone by your side feels so comforting. See you next appointment then.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. I left and headed home. Honestly, I dreaded going back. Even if I got medicine from the clinic, it wouldn't solve the root of the problem. I felt so down. When I arrived, Bob was standing at the entrance, looking furious. I had told him I was going to the clinic, and I returned within the time he had specified. What on earth? Just as I wondered this, Bob began to shout at me.
Come back from the doctor's quicker! Make my meal right now!
Suddenly, he was demanding lunch. How old does he think he is? It might be acceptable for a small child, but we're well into our 30s. Doesn't he feel embarrassed acting this way as an adult? Despite my thoughts, I knew making a fuss would lead to more trouble, so I lightly replied, all right, and let it go. But this was just the beginning of the challenge. Even if I made the meal, he'd complain about the slightest thing, like seasoning. You might think he should just cook for himself, but whenever Bob feels lonely, he becomes unreasonable. This had been his way since we started dating, so I didn't take it too seriously. Looking back, maybe if I'd patiently talked with him, I could have corrected his selfish nature. Lost in thought, I stepped inside the house and placed my shoes in the shoe rack. As I was about to start cooking after putting on an apron, Bob had another demand. I want fried rice. Make it quick, within 5 minutes. I can't make it that fast. Just calm down and wait a bit.
You have a problem with me? Say what you want to say. You know what'll happen, right?
His words silenced me. This pressure from him was nothing new. Since moving into this house, everything felt chaotic. Bob's dominant behavior had scared me deeply. Even though my parents believed we were a happy couple, I had been suffering daily. I had no idea what his parents thought since I hadn't met them, but living with Bob was pure agony. I contemplated voicing at least one complaint against him. While considering this, I finished making the fried rice for both of us. Bob ate without a word of thanks and then left the house. Surprisingly, he didn't return, and the house became peaceful. But the fact remained that Bob was still my husband. If I couldn't get a divorce, I decided to go back to my parents' house. What followed was a deeply unsettling event for me. I truly hoped never to feel that way again. But what was he thinking? Reflecting on it, he seemed purely selfish. Upon reaching my parents' house, they allowed me to stay after I explained why I couldn't divorce Bob. Days passed as I thought of ways to possibly divorce him. The definitive terrible event happened about 6 months after separating from Bob. I received a call on my cell phone. The caller was Bob. Why would he contact me all of a sudden? Did something happen? After all, we're still technically a couple, so it's natural to worry. With that in mind, I answered Bob's call. Hello, it's Catherine. What do you want? Hey Catherine, long time no talk. I heard you bought a new house. Mind if I come check it out? Hearing Bob's cheerful voice after so long took me by surprise. I must be imagining things. It's probably just because I knew the old Bob that I felt this way. I took a deep breath and replied. How did you find out about the new house? I never told you anything.
Oh, I heard it from your dad. He said you built a huge house. Your dad's so nice.
What? I never heard anything about this. To begin with, my family's house was quite old, built in the early 20th century, and had been regularly repaired. But due to financial constraints, my parents agreed with my suggestion to build a new house. And so, while setting a budget, I started preparations to build the new house. However, it's the house I'm buying. To fund the construction of the new house, I had been saving a little bit every month. I had tried to keep it a secret from Bob and never mentioned buying a new house. But what would happen if a selfish person like Bob found out? Fearing the worst, I discussed it with my parents. Who was on the phone? It was Bob. Hey, Dad, I know I shouldn't doubt, but did you tell Bob about the new house? I didn't say a word. He's still an outsider. The decision to build the new house was something we decided as a family. Thought so. I murmured. When I checked with my mother, she said she hadn't met him since the time he came over to greet us. This suggests that Bob might have heard about it from somewhere. We, as a family, thought it was necessary to discuss this with a lawyer. We decided to consult with a lawyer we knew, who's renowned for being exceptional. That being said, we needed to move our belongings to the new house. Come moving day, we had finally finished transporting all our items. But suddenly, a huge load of stuff arrived. Wondering what it was, I turned around to find Bob checking out the interior of the new house.
From today on, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with that, we're getting divorced,
he said. He said it loudly, snorted with satisfaction, and I smiled back, genuinely relieved. Finally, a real chance to get a divorce. No more suffering. The thought alone made me tear up. Seeing me suddenly cry, Bob looked puzzled and stared. Bob had always been the one acting selfishly. So, I thought I had every right to speak harshly to him. All right, I'm gonna start the divorce proceedings now.
Huh? Don't lie.
I placed the business card of the divorce lawyer I had on hand onto the table. Bob looked shocked and uneasy. I couldn't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never tried to understand my feelings or reconsider his own. I didn't want to be with someone like that. From now on, let's discuss matters through the lawyer. If you're going to complain about me not being able to support your parents, Bob, then we might as well get a divorce, right?
No, wait. Don't take it so seriously. Okay?
When was I not serious? Most of the time, I was the one bringing up divorce. To Bob, who was consistently refusing to accept the divorce, I decided to share something additional. That piece of information was about my dedicated counselor, Mike. Ever since we separated, I had been attending counseling sessions about once a month. The things he told me during those sessions genuinely shocked me. Mike suggested that instead of being codependent on Bob, it seemed more like I had been brainwashed. Such matters might be better explained if the person themselves was present. I immediately called Mike. Typically, a counselor shouldn't come over just because they're called, but I knew Mike had the day off today. Just by telling him how close we've become, he'd understand the relationship we've built. I heard the sound of Mike, who had been waiting at my childhood home, pulling up in his car to the new house. Reacting to that noise, Bob stood up and looked outside, appearing utterly shocked. Mike and I, when it comes down to it, have been childhood friends. During our counseling sessions, he often suggested he wanted to help me in some way. I couldn't recall when it started, but he seemed to have always had feelings for me. Mike, my childhood friend who just walked into the house, briefly looked Bob up and down. Then, after taking a few deep breaths, he began questioning Bob. Mike opened up his laptop, checking something. Sneaking a peek, it appeared he was reviewing the notes from our discussions. Finding what he was looking for, Mike began to speak. Bob, first, I believe it's crucial we have a serious conversation. From the start of her counseling sessions with me, Catherine has always been clear about a particular matter. How did you find out her family was buying a new house? Well, I heard it from Catherine's dad. He was boasting about building a new house. Hearing this, my father, who had been listening, glanced at Bob, murmuring, "That's odd. I've never mentioned it to you, Bob. I haven't seen you since you both came over to introduce yourselves as a married couple. Is that true?" "Yes, Catherine, it's true. I've only talked about the new house with you, haven't I?" Indeed, my father and I frequently communicated, and we often discussed the new house. I'd always made sure to share updates when Bob wasn't around. Given how much my father disapproved of Bob's selfishness, he always maintained a calm demeanor. Witnessing how composed my dad was, I felt motivated to stay equally poised. Bob, however, stubbornly retorted,
"Look, I'm telling the truth. I saw you at the local supermarket and you..."
"I haven't seen you there. You always said you were too busy with your caregiving job and left household chores to Catherine. I'm sure I haven't seen you since the day you both visited." But I believe Bob assumed my father would just go along with whatever he said. But my dad wasn't about to play along. Besides, Mike was smugly grinning, having helped me gather evidence. It wasn't like I'd been living a quiet life with my parents while separated from Bob. Having shared our entire marital situation, we'd planned our strategy together. Additionally, there was another concern: Bob's parents. I wanted to know the reason behind Bob's claim of supporting his parents. Conveying my concerns to Mike, he immediately called a lawyer he'd previously arranged. Clueless Bob watched our exchange, looking rather flustered. Shortly after, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of our lawyer. Upon Mike's invitation, the lawyer entered our living room. "Pleased to meet you. My name is Jonathan Peterson. Today, I'm here to discuss Bob's attitude towards Catherine and the divorce proceedings."
Hold on. This doesn't make sense. Catherine, why didn't you consult with me? Aren't we a couple? We should have talked this out.
No matter how much Bob pleaded in his trembling voice, it wouldn't heal the emotional scars he inflicted on me. It was time for me to stand my ground. I want the freedom to choose who I'm with, and I certainly don't want someone like you again. With our family's tense atmosphere, the lawyer began to explain in a matter-of-fact tone. Firstly, regarding Bob's behavior towards Catherine. She got fed up with his constant complaints, proposed a divorce, but he refused. Catherine, is that correct? Yes, it is. Understood. From my findings, I've noticed something crucial. Before addressing the separation, there's another pressing matter. Are you willing to listen? Of course, if it's important, I'd want to hear it. Nodding slightly, I uttered a simple, "Please proceed." And the lawyer nodded in response. To begin with, Bob's parents are in a dire situation. His father has an illness, leaving him immobile. He's been undergoing physical therapy at home but has grown irritable, yelling irrationally. As for his mother, like Bob, she worked in caregiving but faced multiple workplace issues and was eventually forced to resign. This is the first time I've heard that story. I was told that Bob wanted to pursue a caregiving profession because his mother was in the field. I had admired him for that, but it turns out that wasn't the whole story. Moreover, now I understand why he wouldn't discuss his father's situation in detail. It was because his father had become unable to walk due to an illness and had been treated horribly. I feel a bit sorry for him knowing that, but it seems there's more to it. The lawyer's expression darkened in an instant. Catching a quick glance from the lawyer, I nodded resolutely. "Bob, there was a 6-month period where Catherine didn't come home, right? Our investigations during that time revealed you were having an affair. Maybe you were stressed from your caregiving job, not having a decent family to return to, and always getting complaints from your wife. You frequented bars, drank heavily, spent nights with women in hotels, and even racked up debt." I was shocked by the lawyer's revelations. Doing such things behind my back. I truly felt that choosing divorce was the right decision. But after all, he was the person I had once deeply loved and chose to marry. It was impossible not to feel devastated, and tears started to flow. Mike and my parents stood by my side, as if shielding me. On the other hand, Bob looked shattered, every secret exposed. He looked at me, seemingly asking for help, but I turned away. Also, regarding the matter of Bob arriving here with all his belongings. Unfortunately, without the homeowner Catherine's permission, he's not allowed to just enter. He needs to reflect on his actions, agree to the divorce papers, and we're gonna need assurance that he won't interfere anymore.
I admit it was wrong to come without notice. But I still love you, Catherine. I won't make you uncomfortable again. Please stay with me. Catherine.
It's pointless, isn't it? If Bob's parents aren't reasonable, then Catherine's parents' opinions will be prioritized. After our discussions, it was determined that protecting Catherine is the utmost priority. If you'll agree to the divorce, we're willing to let it go. I'll convey this on Catherine's behalf. Seeing this, Bob looked defeated. With a face full of despair, Bob nodded in agreement, and his actions were closely watched by me, my parents, and Mike. Bob finally agreed to the divorce, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. I have nothing but gratitude for my parents and Mike for their support. I sincerely said.
Thank you.
Afterward, I moved out of the house we once shared, leaving Bob behind. He was now responsible for all the housework. Moreover, Bob's parents moved in, and his mother began to boss him around to care for his father. Since he no longer had time for his caregiving job, he quit and began to work part-time. With his existing debts, anyone could guess he was struggling. Being constantly behind on monthly payments, Bob's spirits were down. And while Mike works at a mental health clinic, he seems to have made up his mind not to counsel Bob. Back in high school, when Bob had transferred to our school, he was a very quiet person. Even to Mike, Bob didn't seem to have a bad personality. However, when treated horribly by those around him, his character became twisted. Relationships, whether with spouses, friends, or lovers, influence us greatly.
You can be influenced, but not trying to correct your wrongs isn't right.
Mike commented.
Yeah, I just wish he'd truly reflect on his actions.
I replied.
Exactly, I really don't want him to commit any more wrongs.
Mike added. In response to Mike's words, I deeply nodded in agreement. All I can hope for is that he sincerely reflects on his actions. Mike and I grew closer because of the whole ordeal with Bob. Thanks to that, we decided to get married. Both our families seemed to understand and accept our decision when we told them about our plans to marry. Mike moved into the new house I bought. Since we mainly worked day shifts, we often went out. We watched movies, visited theme parks, sang at karaoke bars. As we spent our happy days together, I became pregnant. I felt so blessed living a life with the person I loved. When our child is born, a new chapter of our life will begin. I can't wait to start that new life. Holding on to dreams with Mike and discussing our roles before our child arrives, every moment feels precious. I'm determined to live a happy life moving forward. This might be what a true married couple looks like. There's no point in fighting. I've learned that from my previous husband. All I can think is that I should do my best to make my life work this time around.
Did the stuff for Jane and Hannah arrive? From today, we're gonna be supporting them.
My husband, Bob, declared triumphantly over the phone. I was at a loss for words due to Bob's sudden declaration. It seemed like Bob only had Jane and Hannah on his mind. There was not a shred of consideration for me. I might as well discard such a husband.
Yep, the stuff arrived, and I just moved into a new place.
I responded in a deliberately cheerful tone. Huh? A new place? Bob muttered and then was stunned. My name is Caroline Smith. I just turned 50 this year. I work in sales at a major company. Although there are constant complaints and troubles from clients, the job is rewarding and enjoyable. I have many clients who have been good to me since back in the day. Working hard on weekdays means I tend to chill at home on weekends. My only family is my husband, Bob. We don't have children. My parents passed away quite a while ago. My parents-in-law live nearby, but we're not that close. We have a casual relationship. Bob loves dining out, often taking his sister Jane along for many of his outings. Jane's daughter, Hannah, always joins them. In the early stages of our marriage, I did complain to Bob. Because he always prioritized Jane and her daughter over me. However, those feelings gradually faded. Why? I want to repay them for the struggles I caused during my student days. After learning of Bob's sincere feelings, I understood. In reality, my in-laws are impoverished. They live in a small, run-down apartment. It's incredibly cramped. Ever since my father-in-law failed in his business ventures, they've lived this way. Still, amidst it all, Bob diligently pursued his studies. However, he didn't pass his first-choice state university. It seems he only got accepted into private universities. Naturally, he was told by his parents that they couldn't afford to pay for it. That's when Jane, who was working at the time, helped out a bit with his tuition. With the aid of scholarships, Bob somehow managed to graduate from college. That's why Bob seems to be grateful to Jane, who supported him during difficult times. And then, after Jane got married, she quit her job. Her husband wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom, it seems. Therefore, the amount of money Jane herself can use is limited. After hearing this story, I stopped complaining. I can understand the reasons for wanting to give back. I thought it best to let Bob do as he pleases. Although there's a bit of loneliness, it can't be helped. Well, I'm gonna go out to eat with Jane and Hannah now. Bob is going to dine out with Jane and her daughter today, as well. Have a good time. With a smile, I saw Bob off. Let's continue to live, supporting each other, with Bob, who values family, in the future. That's what I thought. The rift in our relationship happened about 3 months ago. One day, Bob approached with a serious expression, saying, "In fact, Jane's getting a divorce. She seems to have decided to keep custody of Hannah." When I heard Jane was divorcing, I was honestly very perplexed. Because, to me, Jane was a type of person I found difficult to deal with. This goes back to when I visited Bob's parents' house to introduce myself before we got married. Jane happened to be visiting Bob's family home at the time. "Bob, you're marrying her? She's so plain and has bad taste." Jane laughed uproariously at me as soon as she saw my face. Bob and his parents didn't say a word. Everyone just acted like they didn't notice. So, I had no choice but to tolerate Jane's rude behavior. As I recalled that, Bob continued, "I'm gonna visit home every day for a while. Unlike you, who's thick-skinned, Jane is delicate. And I'm worried about Hannah too." Bob disparaged me with a calm demeanor. However, I did not retort. Arguing with Bob here, and then having him perpetually visit his parents' house, would also be a problem. Take care. I couldn't say anything else and just saw Bob off. From then on, Bob spent more time away from home. Until now, he often came home around 8 p.m. on weekdays. But now, there are times when he doesn't return even by the next morning. He's almost never home on weekends. My loneliness just grew. I'm home. When I returned from work and called out, there was no response at all. The room was pitch dark. Must be at his parents' house again. With Bob's absence, I often found myself downhearted. However, when Bob was home, he began to annoy me more and more. That day, Bob was uncharacteristically at home, but he made an unthinkable request of me. Jane told me, "You haven't given a housewarming gift yet? You're so stingy. You're getting a bonus soon, right? Buy her a designer bag or something." Bob said this as if I must to do so. A housewarming gift. Why do I have to give one? Why don't you do it, Bob? I responded in kind, but Bob instantly got angry. You married into this family, so Jane's your family too, isn't she? Don't you think it's ill-mannered not to even be able to do a simple thing like giving a gift to family? Bob said, berating me. The lecture from Bob went on for about an hour after that. In the end, he only said, anyway. Just make sure to give Jane and Hannah a gift before leaving the house. He's likely gone to his parents' house. I've never received anything from Jane. I murmured quietly. A few days later, I got a call from Jane. Hello? You heard from Bob, didn't you? You really don't think things through. Normally, you'd give a housewarming gift. Jane stated as if she deserves it. I got irritated at the selfish attitude. So, I retaliated. You've never done anything for us either, have you? Even at our wedding, we didn't get a gift from you. During the wedding, Jane said with a smile, we're family, so we don't need a wedding gift, right? And handed over an empty gift envelope. But there's nothing inside, is there? Even when I asked, Jane put on an innocent face. I did buy the envelope, right? I'm so nice, aren't I? Jane said with full confidence. I was at a loss for words at Jane's utter lack of common sense. And Jane had absolutely no restraint. She heartily ate the wedding meal and drank several drinks outside of the course. Even when I handed Jane the catalog gift for the guests, she complained, "Aren't there any no-shows?" If there were, I could take home several. "Caroline, you really don't think things through." That was the outcome, with her complaining like that. Remembering all that, Jane replied with a scoff. "You're my brother's wife. I don't need to give you anything, do I? You're the lowest in our family hierarchy. Rather, it's only natural for you to honor me. If you understand, go buy a new designer bag quickly." I was astounded at the way Jane spoke. Unable to say anything, Hannah strikes up a conversation.
"Caroline, make sure you buy my bag too. It has to be the one exclusive to the Fifth Avenue store, or I won't forgive you. Bye."
Hannah, laughing loudly with a ha ha ha, hung up just like that. Unbelievable. Why am I the only one who has to put up with this? I heaved a big sigh. After that, Bob just stopped coming home. Whenever he did come back, he would take money from my wallet.
"Stop it."
Despite my desperate attempts to stop him, Bob couldn't care less.
"You're always at home, so you're not gonna use the money, right? I'll use it for something worthwhile. Be grateful."
Waving a few bills, Bob left the house. I can't take this anymore. I was becoming worn out from Bob's selfish actions. Then, one day, the doorbell rang, and I opened the front door. "Hello?" Then, someone who appeared to be a mover said, "Is this the residence of Mr. Bob Smith? We'll start moving the stuff in right away," and began bringing a multitude of boxes into the house. I hurriedly tried to stop him. I told him, "Wait a minute. We didn't order this." However, the mover responded with a slightly troubled look. "It's Mr. Bob Smith's residence, right? We received a request directly from him." I was perplexed by the mover's reply. What on earth is all this cardboard boxes? Feeling an inexplicable anxiety, I immediately called Bob. "What is it?" Fortunately, Bob answered right away. In the background of the call, I could hear the crude laughter of what seemed to be Jane and Hannah. I immediately confronted Bob. "There are movers here bringing box after box into our house. What's going on?" Then, Bob said something completely unexpected.
"Oh, did the stuff for Jane and Hannah arrive? From today, we're gonna be supporting them. I don't need your opinion, got it?"
Bob declared triumphantly over the phone. In the background of the call, Jane started to speak. "Welcome aboard. Since you don't have kids, you must be thrilled to take care of our Hannah, right? Be grateful. What? This old lady is gonna be like a parent? So embarrassing, I can't tell my friends." Hannah voiced her displeasure with a tinge of offense. I was at a loss for words due to Bob's sudden declaration. Surely, the in-laws' house must have become too cramped, prompting Jane to plead with him. "Our house is bigger and has spare rooms." No doubt, they were requested by Jane and Hannah, who knew about this. It seemed like Bob only had Jane and Hannah on his mind. There was not a shred of consideration for me. I might as well discard such a husband. I made up my mind. As I remained silent, Bob continued to issue orders. "Additional baggage will arrive in a week. I bought new furniture for Jane and Hannah online. So, make sure to get things sorted out. We'll stay at our parents' place until then. We can't live in a room scattered with boxes." Bob said so with a laugh.
"Hey, isn't this too pitiful for Caroline? She has to sort out our stuff all by herself."
Jane was also snickering. "It's our precious belongings. Handle them with care." Hannah had the audacity to demand. "I want to hang up this call so badly." "So, all right." I simply said that and immediately hung up the phone. Right after hanging up the phone. "All right, let's get to it." I swiftly sprang into action. A week later, Bob called again. "Did the additional baggage arrive? Did you tidy up the room properly?" Bob probably wants to know the current state of the house. He seemed somewhat anxious, unable to calm down. So, I smiled sweetly. Yep, the stuff arrived, and I just moved into a new place. I responded in a deliberately cheerful tone. Huh? A new place? Bob muttered and then was stunned. In fact, on the day Jane and Hannah's belongings first arrived, I promptly sprung into action. I immediately headed to a local real estate agent and directly negotiated, "Find me a place to live, now." Initially, they declined, saying it was impossible. Most places require renovations before moving in, or have handover procedures, which means you can't move in on the same day. But after checking with several agents, I was introduced to a place. It was a women-only shared housing. It came with automatic locks, providing a safe environment for women to live in. The bathroom, toilet, and kitchen are shared, and electricity and gas are already set up. Therefore, they could be used from the first day of moving in. A cleaning service comes regularly, so it seems like a well-thought-out housing. And because it furnished, minimal luggage would not be a problem. According to the real estate agent, there was just one room available. "I'd like to see the room right away," I immediately requested of the agent. They took me to view it straight away. And just by taking one look inside the room, I decided, I'll take it. When I shared this story, Bob was visibly shaken, even over the phone.
Moving out on your own is utterly unreasonable, isn't it? We're a married couple. Apologize to me right now and come home.
Bob scolded me. Jane, perhaps shaken, hysterically asked, "What's happening with our room?" Hannah too yelled angrily, "Don't mess with us, old hag." When I didn't rebuttal, Bob said as if he thought of something clever,
"Do you think it's okay to do such a selfish thing? If we get divorced, you'll be the one in trouble, you know?" "That's right. With your age and looks, you won't find another suitor in the future, right? You're just a plain old lady. Your future's looking pretty bleak, how pitiful." "Serves you right,"
Jane said, sounding rather pleased. In the background over the phone, Hannah was laughing and saying, "The old lady's done for." At that moment, Bob said, sounding smug, "If you apologize to us sincerely from now on, I'll forgive you. Unlike you, we're kind, after all." He snorted through his nose, laughing. In the background of the call, Jane and Hannah were shouting in agreement. So I gave them a piece of my mind. Actually, Bob should be the one apologizing, don't you think? "I know about the affair you're having." "What?" Bob was visibly shaken. "The truth is, Bob has been cheating for over 3 months now. The other woman is a colleague from his workplace." "How did you find out?" "I thought I'd been utterly discreet," Bob asked, his voice trembling with fear. He must have been so sure he wouldn't get caught. So, it wasn't surprising he reacted that way. Being the kind-hearted person that I am, I decided to tell him. "I hired a private investigator just in case. Because you've hardly been home, right? I thought maybe you were cheating. Good thing I trusted my instincts." And since Bob stayed silent, I just kept on going. I was shocked when the PI got back to me. They finished the investigation in 3 days. "You were seeing her every day, huh? Those meals out with Jane and Hannah were only on your days off, it seems." "They said they got plenty of pictures too," I said, laughing. According to the PI's findings, Bob had been gallivanting around with his mistress every day after work. The money he'd likely been taking from my wallet must have been for her. Bob and his mistress were often close together, making it easy for the PI to get good pictures. "I'm gonna divorce you, Bob, and I'll be demanding alimony. And of course, from your colleague, the mistress, as well. Expect a certified letter at your office," I said, smirking to Bob. After receiving the PI's results, I headed straight to a law firm. Having conclusive evidence, even the lawyers seemed rather taken aback. "How dare you?" Bob spat out, clearly irate. When the certified letter arrives at the company, even without opening it, they'll probably have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And it's not just going to Bob, but to his mistress at the same company. Surely everyone at the office will find out about their affair.
Hey! Bob, are you okay?
The situation has taken a dark turn, and Jane sounded anxious. Jane must have been planning to have Bob and me take care of life's chores for her, intending to lead a leisurely life as a NEET. Jane has a long history of being a housewife, and it's unlikely she can start working now. Bob is the only one to rely on, and it can't be helped, I guess.
Bob, what are you gonna do? I haven't worked a day since graduating from high school, and there's no way I'm doing a part-time job now.
Hannah seems slightly troubled as well. Even when Jane and Hannah blame him, Bob remains silent, unable to say anything. I delivered a further blow to Bob.
Bob, you probably haven't saved any money, have you? It said in the investigation report that you've been generously spending on your mistress. Even bought her the new designer handbag.
Maybe you're in debt, too? I dropped a bomb. What? Whether Bob is shaken up, he can't find the words. Ignoring him, Jane is yelling at him.
What? You don't buy them for me, but why did you get them for your mistress? Are you kidding me? Plus, debt? How much do you owe?
I hate you, Bob.
Even though I begged so much, you never bought me anything.
Hannah also scolds Bob in a high-pitched voice. On the other side of the phone, Jane and Hannah are noisily complaining. Caroline, I really am sorry. So, please, handle these two somehow. Bob pleaded with me in an exhausted voice. But I have no intention of forgiving Bob.
Why don't you deal with it yourself?
I'm not involved, and it's what you deserve.
Better tell your mistress soon. If you dilly-dally, a certified mail will reach your company, you know?
I said to Bob with a smirk. Damn. Bob seemed frustrated. Ignoring such a Bob, I spoke.
Well then, do your best. And please give me plenty of alimony.
I hung up the phone right there. After hanging up, there were several calls from Bob, but I ignored them.
Let Bob and Jane struggle as much as they want.
I muttered quietly and set Bob's contact to block incoming calls. After that, my divorce with Bob was finalized. Initially, Bob resisted. Because there was dual income until now, Bob could afford to live even while he just messed around. With just Bob's income, maintaining the lifestyle we've had until now is certainly not feasible. It seems like Bob understands that, which is why he doesn't want to divorce me. However, I have decisive evidence of Bob's infidelity. Ultimately, I conveyed to him that I have absolutely no intention of reconciling, and that I will take legal action if he doesn't agree to the divorce any longer. With that, Bob, hanging his head down, said, "I'll agree to the divorce," and stamped the divorce papers. And so, I demanded alimony from Bob and settlement for emotional damage from his partner. The amount was determined while being informed about the going rate from my lawyer. So, I believe it's a fair amount. In fact, Bob's partner paid it promptly. Apparently, she borrowed it from her parents after explaining the situation. However, it was a steep amount for Bob. Can it be reduced? Even though he said that numerous times, I ultimately rejected Bob's request. During the meeting with our lawyers at the law office, "How about I add on the money you stole from my wallet?" As I cheerfully asked that, Bob turned pale as a ghost. "That amount is fine." In the end, Bob, trembling, agreed. After that, both Bob and his partner resigned from their company. The reason was that their affair was exposed within the company. It seems that the delivery of a certified document brought attention to the relationship between the two. Even if the contents of the envelope were unknown, an envelope from a divorce law office tends to be pretty self-explanatory. One can generally guess what's inside. Eventually, Bob resigned because things got uncomfortable. Being the subject of juicy gossip around the office, perhaps he couldn't stand it. After leaving the company, Bob has been working in day labor via an agency. Due to his age, it seems he couldn't find another job right away. But payments won't wait. He has living expenses, plus there's the installment payments of alimony to me. Plus, the mortgage still has a long way to go. Moreover, the debts he likely incurred during his affair came to light. Life's probably gonna be pretty tough, I bet. Sometimes I get messages from Bob, through the lawyer, to me.
I was wrong. Please take me back. I'm begging you. I'm barely scraping by. If I'd known this would happen, I would have been nicer to Caroline.
Bob says, reportedly weeping in front of the lawyer. I think he's really backed into a corner, but it's too late now. And the situation for Jane and Hannah doesn't look good either. Currently, they are living with Bob. But since Bob has no money, their living situation seems dire. One day, I got a message from Jane on my cell. I had blocked Bob's number, but I hadn't blocked Jane's. Seems like that backfired. Wondering what she could possibly want now, I answered the call. Hello? And the moment I answered, Jane begged me.
Please, help us. We're living with Bob, but he has no money and our electricity and gas are gonna be shut off. We don't even have anything left to eat.
Jane spoke in an exhausted voice. I was surprised that their living situation had become so desperate. But I had no intention of helping. So, I brushed Jane off coldly. Why don't you work? You're healthy, aren't you, Jane? You used to work back in the day, right? Then, Hannah, presumably next to Jane, spoke up. Caroline, isn't that harsh? You're working at a major company. You wrangled money out of Bob and his affair partner, so you must have some financial leeway, right? So, you have a duty to support Mom and me. If you tell us your address, we'll come there. Take care of us. Hannah apparently has no intention of working, even now. It's truly exasperating, considering she's still young. Biting back a sigh, I conveyed my stance. Now that I'm divorced from Bob, I'm a complete stranger to you, Hannah. I have no intention of supporting you, and I don't want anything more to do with you. Don't call me again. As soon as I finished speaking, Hannah shouted.
Don't mess with me, you old hag. You should just quietly take care of us. Tell us your address right now.
After that, they kept shrieking for quite a while. Their characters will likely never change for the rest of their lives. I have nothing to do with this anymore. Goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone. I immediately blocked Jane's number. I never want to deal with them again. In their current state, they will likely face more hardship. But it's their own laziness that brought this upon them. I think it's fine if they continue to suffer. A year later, I decided to move out of the shared housing. It's a bit sad to leave where I made friends. The reason I'm leaving this fun and lively place is because I decided to adopt a dog. I met the dog at an adoption event. A dog-loving friend invited me, and I went along. That's where I had a destiny-filled encounter. While other dogs were being friendly with various people, this dog was different. It stared at me intently. The moment our eyes met, I thought, this dog might need me. After that, I attended the adoption events many times and deepened my bond with him. After several visits, joyfully, I was allowed to adopt him. However, the shared housing don't allow pets. So, sadly, I had to move out. Now I live in a pet-friendly apartment. Dogs don't betray you, and it's so cute. Come here. When I call, he runs towards me joyfully. There will probably be various difficulties in the future. But I'm not alone anymore. I want to move forward, facing forward, supporting each other with this beloved